So welcome to the dojo. So great to see so many of you joining. If it's your first time in the dojo for a hands-on session, we use these separate dev orgs. I encourage you not to work directly in production, but in these dev orgs, it takes a couple minutes to set up a dev org, and then that's a nice separate place to do an exercise like we're going to do today. Kyle has added to the chat the link to information on how to set up the dev org. Again, it just takes a couple minutes if you want to do the hands-on exercises. You don't have to do the hands-on exercises. Kyle, maybe we'll throw that into the chat one more time for the folks that just arrived, and we'll go ahead and get started. So Chris, you're absolutely welcome to watch. No need to set up a dev org if you don't want to do the hands-on. So welcome everyone to the Dashboard Dojo. You know what, let's go to the next slide. Welcome everyone to the Dashboard Dojo. My name is David Carnes. Today in the dojo, we're going to be talking about reporting snapshots. So we'll do quick introductions. We'll recap the dojo org setup in case you missed it and you just joined. We'll talk a little bit about trending. So why is trending valuable? This is probably the single biggest thing that's missing in many of your Salesforce instances. Your leadership teams are crying out for trending information. It is such a great way to understand what's going on in the business, and are things getting better or are things getting worse? We'll dive into talking about specifically today reporting snapshots and what are the ingredients, and then we'll go through each of the different steps to setting up a reporting snapshot. So we'll talk through the Waza and the Shiai, the techniques and the practice. We'll also talk about upcoming OpFocus events. We'll talk about upcoming dojo topics, and then we'll try to address Q&A along the way. So again, welcome to the Dashboard Dojo. So who am I? My name is David Carnes. I'm the chairman and chief evangelist of a SaaS RevOps consulting firm called OpFocus. We've been working in the Salesforce community since 2006. I'm honored to be part of the Salesforce MVP group. Just to share something about myself, I'm really intent on walking the El Camino de Santiago. Here's a photo. I was in Rioja in the Basque Country with my family a couple years back, and I think my youngest was about 11 in this photo. You can see the El Camino. It's about a 500-mile pilgrimage across northern Spain. Depending on which route you take, it can start in northern France, or there are other places you could start, but really quite striking. Let's get rid of this call. Again, just a little bit about OpFocus. We're a team of 50. We're spread out across the US and Canada. We work with software companies to help them optimize their operations. Thank you once again to Kyle for hosting us today.
Happy to be here.
Oh, Samantha said she did portions of the Camino. That's so cool. I'm so glad. All right, so for some of you that are first time, what is a dojo? I had some fun in my early years. I spent almost 3 years living in Japan, and I got to visit a number of different dojos for different martial arts disciplines. The word dojo just is really a place. It's a place to learn the way, or a place of the way. So those two characters, the one on the left is the one for way or road, and the character on the right is a place for location. So literally it's just the location of the way, but we think of it as a place to learn the way. And these are almost like hallowed ground in Japan, and literally across the world. This is for a sport called kendo, which is quite intense, and it's kind of like hallowed ground. Sorry about that. Make sure that doesn't happen again. Great. All right, so I'd said before, if you've just joined, if you want to do the hands-on part of today, I encourage you to use a separate dev org. In the Dashboard Dojo, we always use the same kind of dev org. So if you've done one of our hands-on sessions before, you've already done this, you can go ahead and log back into that other earlier dev org. I really want to encourage you not to do these exercises directly into production, into your company's or your organization's instance. So there are two steps. You create a dev org, which is free. You have it forever. And then if you can do it, I'd ask you to just run the Trailhead Data Manager, and that just moves the dates. So why do we use these dev orgs? These dev orgs have thousands of records in them, which makes reporting a little more interesting. All right, so maybe Kyle, you can throw, you already did, great, the Dojo setup link into the chat. All right, so let's talk about why trending. I got a chuckle finding this particular trend online when I was just thinking. So it's the US biodegradable super absorbent materials market size. And it's basically diapers and adult incontinence, trends. So I don't know why, scatological humor, I guess. But this is showing the trend, and it's showing year by year. Suspiciously, it looks a little too clean. This doesn't look like, but let's say that there was suddenly regulation in some state or some part of the world. Probably it'd be Berkeley, California, that would say no more plastic diapers. They have to be biodegradable. And then suddenly you might see a spike in the trend, and we could explain that by that legislation. So like, why would we bother with trending? Well, this allows us to understand today versus the past. We can identify areas of strength that we might want to continue. We can highlight underperformance. We can provide evidence to inform decision-making. This is such an important thing to introduce into your reporting skill set to support your leadership team. So we can also predict where things are going. You notice this super absorbent materials market size. 2023 hasn't happened yet. There's a projection, you can kind of eyeball it. So trending is helpful for that as well. So really, what it allows us to do is tell a story over time. Rather than just seeing the number 42 on the screen, we can see that the week before it was 41, the week before that it was 42, and that's either a bad thing or a good thing, but we can see that over time. So there are a number of ways that we can do trending in Salesforce. And there are a number of things that we might want to trend. So we might want to trend financial data. So this could be your opportunities, your opportunity pipeline health. This could be leads that, what's the trend with leads? This could be ratios. So in my business, so we have a CFO. The CFO, I meet with him regularly. We review a number of ratios within the business. There's the quick ratio, there's leverage ratio, there's just other things that we're interested in and tracking over time. For the purpose of Salesforce, probably current workload is a big thing that you might trend. So it could be the open cases, it could be the open leads or active leads, it could be your open pipeline. We're going to zero in on that open pipeline example, but there are other things that you can do with this. And you just think of like a workload, and this week we have this many open, and next week we have that many open, and the week after that we have that many open, and we can trend that over time. So we might do our pipeline, support tickets, active leads, etc. So we have a few different kinds of trending in Salesforce. So I'm just going to talk about 4 options, and then today is focused on 1 option. But you can trend on just opportunity data alone, or just regular data, so using dates on actual records. So this top screenshot here is all opportunities that are won by close date, grouped by year, and then close date grouped by month. And this is an interesting trend because it allows us to see things like seasonality. We can also see anomalies. So we're seeing essentially each of the months of the year and then each of the years and how we performed. So this doesn't need anything special to do something like this. You're just creating a report, let's say on all your won opportunities, and you're grouping it twice by close year and by close month. So another option we have in Salesforce down below is to use a feature. It's been around forever. I first probably logged into Salesforce in 2005, and I think it was there then. See, nothing to turn on. It's called Opportunity Trends. So if you create a report and you choose the Opportunity Trends report type, this is a built-in feature with nothing you need to turn on that you can take advantage of trend data. So what Salesforce does is it records key opportunity fields. It's like a handful of fields. And it allows you to, when you create a report using this report type, you can do a report on the you can essentially group by the as of date. You can group by historical date. You can group by historical stage, etc. So for this mechanism, Salesforce is snapshotting on the first day of every month. There's no way to change it. There's no way to modify it. It just is what it is the first day of every month. And that might give you some good, interesting intel on trending. So it looks like I copied and pasted and have weird builds here. So let me go through all the builds. Okay, I think that's it. So that's pretty funny. So a third type of trending is a feature called historical trending, and sort of comically, I don't even really think of this as trending, but it has the word trend in the name. So historical trending allows you to see what changed since last week. This does require an admin to turn it on, but it'll show you red or green has something changed positively, and you're comparing today's value versus a prior value, such as 7 days ago versus now. So that's a feature called historical trending. We did talk about these other 3 types of trending back in October of 2020. There's a recording on dashboarddojo.com going through all of these various trending tools. The one we're going to focus on today is a little bit more involved and gives us so much more flexibility. So it's called reporting snapshots. At the bottom of the screen here, we can see a kind of a beautiful 52 weeks of open pipeline chart. And the way that we've built this is using something called a reporting snapshot. And you control the schedule. Is the snapshot running daily, weekly, or monthly? You control the source, so you create a source report that feeds the snapshot. You control where the snapshot data is stored. Typically, we'll create a custom object to store this. You also control who has access to this. So this is pretty different than these other types of trending, though, again, it requires special permission. So we'll need to be a sysadmin. This is another reason why we use these dev orgs, because you are a sysadmin in your own dev org. So Janine asked the question, does it only use standard fields, or can you grab custom fields? You can absolutely grab custom fields in the reporting snapshot that we're going to do today. Absolutely. For that other one called opportunity trends, you cannot use custom fields. So that's another differentiator. Great question. So we're going to do an overview of reporting snapshots. We'll talk about creating a safe place to store the source report. We'll talk about the source report itself and what columns you might want to include. I tend to keep my source reports absolutely clutter-free. I only want the exact number of columns that I'm going to be feeding into the snapshot. Then you create a custom object. That custom object is essentially going to have one field per column on your source report. This is a really, really old screenshot from Salesforce, but it still applies. You can see here, we're going to create a source report with a set of columns. I think you might even be able to snapshot something like 100 columns. My suggestion, though, is that you snapshot 5 or maybe max 10 columns. You're not going to actually be able to use all this stuff. You're typically snapshotting dates that change, amounts that change, statuses that change, stuff like that. So we're going to create a source report. We're going to create a custom object that's going to be our target, and it's going to have one column, one custom field per column in our source report. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to define the snapshot. And that's the thing that's in green. And so it's essentially we're going to say, wake up every Monday night at 11 o'clock and run the report and copy all the information and populate the data into the target object. So why do we do this? Well, this gives us really nice flexibility and control over trend reports, which we can then create. So let's get started on this. So, we could, on a dashboard or a report, look at our open pipeline. And we could see that in the left screenshot here, it's just a funnel on a report. That's a single date, just showing one date of our open pipeline. So that could be nice. But we can also look at that compared to the last 50 weeks, 51 weeks if we want, and that's what the bottom screenshot is showing us. So we could just create a report showing open pipeline and look at that, but we can also see, well, how does this week compare to last week and all the weeks before it? And we can do that with a reporting snapshot. So these don't look like funnels, but they are essentially the same thing. This is a report that's grouped by the execution date of the snapshot. And as of each one of these dates, what did that funnel look like? And so this is grouped by opportunity stage. So once a week, the snapshot is running and copying the open pipeline information. So copying what's in that funnel and putting it into this custom object, which we then can report on. So to show you what this looks like, we've actually had one running for more than a decade at OpFocus. So Kyle, you were probably in high school when this thing was set up, right? So
yeah.
This is actually from the OpFocus system, and I can see some things that I did 10 years ago that I wouldn't do now. So we can see here the pipeline snapshot. So this is something an admin would create for you after you've created the other ingredients, but you give it a name, you specify who the running user is, you specify what's the source report, you then also identify what's the target object. So you would have already had to create those ingredients, and we'll go through each of those things. Then in the snapshot, you're defining the mappings. So for every single column in the report that you want to snapshot, you would map it to a field on that custom object. So this is why you have to build all that stuff first before defining the snapshot. So we can see here that 10 years ago, I actually snapshotted the account ID and the opportunity ID. We have used that information 0 times in the decade since we created this. It's just not, it's not necessary. But those other fields are really super valuable to us, such as amount and close date, opportunity name, opportunity owner, and stage. These are things that might change. The name probably doesn't change, but it gives us a reference point. The execution time is not a field on the source report, but it is the key to all this working. When we create our target object, we're going to create a field. I usually just call it date, but we're going to map the time that the report is run by the snapshot, and we're going to populate that into that date field. And that's how we're going to do the grouping. So if I go back to the last screen, it's that date field off of that custom object that is making all these groupings here. That's kind of the secret to how all this works. So the other thing you do when you create this pipeline snapshot is you say, when is it going to run? At OpFocus, it's been every week on Monday night at 11 o'clock for years and years and years. So why did we pick 11 o'clock on Monday? Well, probably way back when the leadership team met on Monday. The pipeline was its like nicest, scrubbiest, cleanest Monday nights after the leadership team meeting. We had the cleanest pipeline. That's probably when you want to run your snapshot. The other thing you do that's a little strange is you say, when is it starting? And then when is it ending? And you notice the end date here is 77 years from now. You don't, the default is it'll run for a month and shut off, and you probably want it to run longer than that. So way in the bottom right hand of my screen here, I have defined the end date as something, the end time way out in the future. So what you can also do with a pipeline snapshot is you can look back in time. So this again is the OpFocus Open Pipeline Snapshot, and it runs every Monday, and it looks like it runs at 11:20 for whatever reason. So not 11 o'clock, but 11:20. And it's, you could just go back through time. What you can also see here, was it successful or not, and how many records were created. So if each week at 11 o'clock at night, we have 68 open opportunities, those fields are going to be copied into this snapshot object. And the week before it looks like 68, the week before 68. That's sort of interesting to have 3 weeks similar like that. The week before that it was 70, the week before that was 72. It's been interesting over the years to just watch the number of open opportunities grow. Okay, so this is the sort of a high level snapshot. Let's actually get in and start building our snapshot. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a read-only snapshot report folder. We're going to do that in a minute. We're going to create a source report in that folder. We're going to create a target custom object that has a matching fields per source from that report. We're going to define and schedule the snapshot. And then you kind of have to wait for some time to go by. This is probably the hardest part, is the human part of saying, oh, right, I have to wait till next Monday for this stupid thing to run. And then when it runs, I only have 1 week's worth of data. So I'm going to want to wait for it to run again the week after, and again the week after. It's kind of easier to create reports when there's some data to look at. So the other thing you could do is just go manufacture some data or load in some historical data to allow you to create the ultimate reports, the final reports that show the trending. So that's what you're going to do in the final step. Is once you've built out all this mechanism, you're then going to create reports off of that target object. And there are a couple of things here that you're going to need to be a sysadmin. So to define and schedule the snapshot, I probably should have put an asterisk on this one as well. There is a permission that you could be given as a super user to do this, but certainly to create the custom object, you have to be a system administrator or have one that's a friend of yours. All right, so let's talk about protecting our snapshot source reports. So that, you know, the terrible thing to happen would be you create this whole mechanism and then somebody goes and changes your source report and essentially breaks your snapshot. So to prevent that, we're going to start off by creating a folder. If you joined our last dojo, we created a folder called System Reports. And what we're going to do now is create another folder within that called Snapshot Source Reports. And we can see if you were here before, my suggestion is we create a folder called System Reports, and we create a folder within that called Snapshot Source Reports. And then at the system report level, we're going to make that read only. We're essentially going to share that. Why don't we go do that together? So I have a dev org here. And if I were to go into the reports tab, this just freeze on me. How often does that happen? Oh, there we go. Okay, so I might create a new folder, and I think I already have one with that same name, but I'll just go ahead and let's just do this one together. Let's click on new folder. So again, on the reports tab, let's click on new folder. And I like to suggest creating it with, what in the world is going on here? Okay, so it just seems like it's like about 5 minutes behind. Very slow thing here. I'm going to hardwire into the gigabit Ethernet rather than relying on Wi-Fi. Great. So when you create a folder, you give it a name. So why don't you create your top level folder called System Reports if you don't already have one. I don't think this has ever happened before, Kyle, in one of our dojos that let me stop the share for 1 second. Let me just quit out of, sorry guys, this is bizarre. This was working all morning. No issues. All right, so. I'll just get right back into my dev work. I'll get the screen share started again. So Kyle, I think you might have to give me permission to share my screen.
Do that now.
And that's an issue because of me making you the host, I think. Thank you for doing that.
Of course.
All right, great. All right, so back in our system, again, I apologize for that. All right, so if I go back to the reports tab, I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder, and I'll just suggest that we do this together. So you might call this System Reports. I'm going to put the number 2 after mine because I know I already have one. But then within that folder, we're going to create another folder called Snapshot Reports. And you might have other system reports for other reasons. We're going to use this one called Snapshot Reports. I do want to point out that at the sub folder level, you can't share that. You can just view the shares. So if you can see on my screen, I'll try to make it a little larger. But once I've created that subfolder called Snapshot Reports, I can't share at that level. Nested folders you can't share, but you can share at the top level. What we're going to do is just go right back up to the parent folder called System Reports. And I'll go into the sharing there, the down arrow to the right of the word new folder when I'm looking at the system report folder. So again, we're on the reports tab. I might have gone to all folders, system reports. I'm looking at the system report folder, and I can click on that down arrow, the action menu, and share. And what we're going to do is share with all internal users. So there's a public group called all internal users. So if we share that with, and don't forget to click the share button, we're going to share the view, share it view only. So this way people can run, people won't be able, they could see my report if they needed to, but they can't modify my report. So this is just how you can grant other people the ability to see your report, but not modify it. So this is the folder to store the source report. I'm going to keep going. So if we've done that, we've given us a place to store our snapshot source. Now let's go ahead and create a source report. So I've got an example here on the screen for open case snapshot. We're going to do one in a minute called open pipeline. But you want to create a source report with as few columns as needed to support your trending goals. When you go to the report builder to the right of the word columns, there's the action menu there. You can quickly remove all columns if you want, and then just add the specific ones. Things that you might want to track in a snapshot are things like who's the owner, what's the status, priorities. On opportunities, the case reason, maybe that doesn't change all that often. You might have types, substatuses, anything that might change is something that would be really good for trending. So I created a report here and I'll show you mine and then I'll ask you to create one. So I have this open pipeline snapshot source report. So literally I went to the new report button, created a new report. I created the report on the opportunity object, and I'm going to have you do that in 1 second. But when you create the report on the opportunity object, then you're going to, in the editor, the report builder, you could remove all columns and then just add the columns you want. So such as opportunity owner, opportunity name, stage, close date, forecast category, and amount. This is a pretty good set to do an open pipeline trend. So why don't I have you guys create a report like that? This is going to be your source report, and I'm going to ask you to save it in that folder. So I have the instructions here. So to create an open pipeline source report, and you can see a couple of the screenshots to help you with the filters. So the filters, we just want to show all open opportunities of all time that have the that are open, essentially. We want to include columns for owner, name, stage, close date, forecast category, and amount. And then if you'd save it as the open pipeline snapshot source report. So if you want to do this hands-on, we'll just give you a moment now to create a report. So Samantha asked the question, will this recording be shared? Oh, it looks like Kyle, you answered it. Okay, great. So the answer is yes. So on the Dojo site, we have all the recordings. There's probably 20 hours or more of recordings that Kyle has so dutifully listened to me blather on about that reporting functionality, but there's a lot there. Thank you for putting that in the chat, Kyle. All right, so this just takes a moment to, so Mitch, they're all YouTube videos. So you will be able to do whatever you can do with a YouTube video. So they're just accessible. And this one isn't posted yet because we haven't finished it yet, but we'll get there. All right, so once you create your open pipeline source report, go ahead and save the report. So I saved mine as the open pipeline snapshot source report. And I typically will add a description like keep your paws off. This report feeds our open pipeline snapshot object to support our trending. Please do not modify. And I put it into that read only, that view only folder that we had created. All right, so now we get on to sort of the deeper end of the swimming pool of creating an open pipeline snapshot object. So we want to create a custom object to store your open pipeline snapshot data. If you're not a system administrator or you've never done this before, you might ask for help, ask another admin for help. As a sysadmin in our dev org, we can go under setup, We can go to the object manager. We can create a new object, and I like to give it a clear name. I like it to have the exact same name essentially as that source report. So the open pipeline snapshot. When we create the custom object, we're going to allow reports. We're going to add one field per column in the source report. We're going to want to match the data types. So a date such as the close date, we're going to want to create a custom field on that snapshot object of type date. There's one extra field we need to add to make all the magic happen, which on that custom object, we're going to add a custom field. I usually just call it date, and it's going to be of data type date. And that's what we're going to group the ultimate reports on. There's one other step that we're going to need to do to grant read access to the custom object. So let me show you this in the system. So if I go under setup, and as a now I've got my sysadmin hat on, under object manager, I've already started creating one of these. And I called it the open pipeline snapshot. I do want to point out, as if I'm just creating it new before I show you what I created. But if I go ahead and click the create button, again, we're under setup, object manager. And if I click the create button and choose custom object, I need to give it a label, give it a plural label. And if I scroll down, one of the keys is that you allow reports on your custom object. You do not want to forget to do that. Otherwise, you can't report on your snapshot data. Okay, so that's a sort of a rookie mistake. I might have made that 10 years ago when this feature was just introduced and we set up the one in the OpFocus system. So let me show you the object that I set up, and then I'll ask you to go ahead and get started creating a custom object in a moment. So I can find the one that I created by using the search here. I called mine open pipeline snapshot. And once you create the object, and I can see that reports is enabled, if I go to fields and relationships, I can see that I've already created, this is the Julia Child sort of moment of, I've already got a few of the pots boiling here. I've got the close date field created. I created that custom field called date that's going to store the execution time of the snapshot. I have one here called owner. I have one here called stage. I'm going to create two more custom fields. And to show you what it's like to create a custom field on this new object, again, I'm under the fields and relationships section of the custom object. I'm going to click new. And I'm going to choose the data type. So for a field like stage or for a field like forecast category, I will typically store those as text. You could create it as a pick list, but there's no reason to. Pick list is stored as text, and you could just pass it to a text field. So I'm going to choose text, and I'm going to create one for forecast category. You want to make sure the length is just longer than whatever the longest value in that pick list is. I'm going to say 25. I think that's fine. I'm going to click next. I'm going to click next. This is going to put it on the page layout. This is going to give people access to see that. I'm going to do save and new. I think there was one more that I needed to create, which was amount.
No, I'm sorry. Before you go on, Denise is asking what data type this field should be.
Oh, for forecast category, I'd say stored as text. Forecast category is a field on opportunity that's a pick list. And you could just store it as text. I think that's easier rather than making it a pick list and putting in all the same values. You don't need to do it. The source is a pick list, so you can just store it as text. So I'm gonna have you guys do the exercise in just a second. Let me just show you creating one more field here. I'm gonna create a field for amount. It's data type currency. I'm gonna go ahead and just click next, and click save. I've now finished my object because I have a column for stage. That's a text. I made it 30 characters wide. I have one for owner. I think I missed one more, which would be the name of the opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and create one more field. And this is just going to be plain old text. I know that name fields are, maybe I'll call this one opportunity name. I know that name fields are usually 80 characters, so it's not going to be more than that. 80 would be fine. I'll click next, save. So that was kind of a quick run through of, hey, I've created a custom object and I've created a bunch of fields. What I'd like you to do now is actually try that out. And so that, it's clear what I'm asking you to do. We've created a source report. We now want to create a custom object to store the columns from that source report. So I want you to create a custom object, and I want you to call it Open Pipeline Snapshot. So to do that, we have to wear our admin hats. We go under Setup. We go to the Object Manager. To the right, there's a button that lets us create a new object. When you create your new object, I want you to call it Open Pipeline Snapshot. I want to make sure you check the box to allow reports. And I want you to add a field for each column in the source report, such as owner, name, stage, close date, forecast category, and amount. And as best as you can, you want to match the data types. So for owner, that might be text. You might just store that as text. For name, that would be text. That's where we're going to put the opportunity name. For stage, I'd store it as text. Maybe make it 30 characters wide. For close date, I'd make that a date field. Forecast category, text. Current amount would be currency. So there's one extra field, which is the field called date. This is the key field in the custom object. So Tim asked a great question. Any comments about lookups? I had added a few 10 years ago to the OpFocus Open Pipeline Snapshot, and I never used them. You could create a lookup, and you can pass the ID from the source report. You could add an ID column in your source report, and you could pass that ID to a lookup field on your custom object here. So Tim, it's a great question. There might be a need to do that, or some benefit reporting wise when you think about your ultimate reporting goal. All right, so if you're wondering what we're doing, we're just taking a moment, if you wish, to try out and add, so create a custom object called Pipeline Snapshot, Open Pipeline Snapshot, and then create this list of fields which correspond to the source report. So we'll take another moment to do it. If you don't finish it just now, it's not a problem. You can just finish as many fields as you got done, and then we can keep going in just another minute. So you can always circle back and add the rest of the fields later. So I'm going to show on my screen what I had built out. So I have a custom object here called Open Pipeline Snapshot. You can always find this object, and if you needed to add a field later, you could do that. You could add another column to your source report. You could come back here. The way to find this would be to go under the gear, choose Setup, select Object Manager, and then look for your object. Once you've selected the object, you can select fields and relationships, and you can see. Oh, that's so funny. Oh, that's so funny. I must have had a value. When I was typing in the word amount, it must have auto-populated amount with tax. So that wasn't my objective. That's pretty funny. It's funny all the kooky things happening with my system today. I'm going to fix this. Okay, Salesforce is telling me to be careful when you make these changes. I feel like I'm in an infinite loop. What is going on? Huh. All right, it didn't let me make that change. Okay, let's see. Huh. I've never seen this before quite like this, that it's saying be careful and it keeps going back. So why that is. All right, I'm not going to fight it, and I'm just going to leave it. I feel like today is a bizarro day anyway. But you can see here, close date, or you know what I could always do? I could just create another field. So why don't I do that? And I won't allow it to overwrite my. See, if you just take your eyes off, see how it keeps auto-populating? What is going on?
Tim says it looks like your form field filling thing is getting confused.
Yes, it clearly is. All right, there we go. I got it. All right, so I got it without it. And now I can go in and delete that other one. That is too funny. All right, so this is the kooky stuff that can happen. Now what I could do is just go ahead and delete that other field because I don't want that one there. All right, so now that we've created that, I do want to point out one other thing. When you create this object, the moment you create a custom object in Salesforce, literally no one can see it. No one can see this object, okay? So if you do want to allow other people to see and report on your snapshot data, there is another step. I'll show you for one profile what that looks like, but if you have a bunch of profiles of your users in the system, you need to do this for multiple profiles. So I'm going to go to a profile called custom sales profile, and I just want to show you on that custom sales profile, if I go look at that profile and I go down to object settings, just to show you that no one is going to be able to report on your data. So we have opportunity pipeline snapshots, and just to prove it, there's no access. So what I would want to do is actually go to, and this is a sysadmin thing, would need to give permission. The most important person is whoever's going to be running the reports on this information. So if it's just the leadership team, make sure the leadership team profiles have access. To do this, this is, again, the deep end of the swimming pool. A sysadmin just needs to update each profile or use something called a permission set. So I'm editing the profile for this object, the object settings. I'm checking a box, allowing them to read. They don't need to change this data. They just need to be able to read it. Okay, so I've given it to one profile. Now I need to do it for other profiles, just to point that out. All right, so we've created a source report. We've created a custom object. Now what we want to do is define and schedule the snapshot. So we're going to do that under Setup, Feature Settings, Reports and Dashboards, and then there's the Reporting Snapshot. So this is typically something a sysadmin does on your behalf. You created the source report, they created the custom object, they will now do this scheduling piece for you. You want to name it clearly. You want to specify the running user. The running user is a concept in Salesforce reports and dashboards that appears in a couple of different places. You're probably most familiar with it on a dashboard. But the running user is through whose eyeballs or through whose permissions is this thing going to run. So it's important to have that person be high enough. It could be you, it could be the head of sales operations, it could be the CEO, put her name in there. Just have the person be high enough. We want to identify the source report. We want to identify the target object. That's that custom object we just built. And then once we've given those two things, we're going to map the fields. So you may not have finished your custom object. Don't worry about it for now. What I'm going to suggest is we now go under Setup and we expand Feature Settings, Analytics, Reports and Dashboards, and then Reporting Snapshots. So once again, Setup, Feature Settings, Analytics, Reports and Dashboards, and then Reporting Snapshots. You have a nice little overview, and you can see where I stole the screenshot from. I'm going to click past this. And then we can define the reporting snapshot. So I had created my source report. I created my custom object. Now that those things are done, we can come here. Again, it's either a sysadmin who's doing it, or there's a profile permission that you can be granted to manage reporting snapshots. So I'm going to go ahead and click New Reporting Snapshot. We'll give it a name. I, again, use that same name, Open Pipeline Snapshot. Chris, thank you. Yes, I borrowed the screenshot. I have borrowed the same screenshot many, many, many times, hundreds of times in the last 10 years. I'm going to put myself as the running user. And then This looks like what reporting looked like in 2005. It's kind of funny. This is an older interface. If you're wondering what it used to look like when I was a boy, we can come down in here, we can scroll through, we can find our source report. It's, you know, if you have 10,000 reports in your system, you've got a bit of scrolling to do, but it looks like I've got a lot of stuff in here. So there should be one called, so Quokka Dream and System Reports. So it should be in here. That's not the one. Oh, okay, so this is flattened out all the folders, but I can see the Open Pipeline Snapshot source report. And then I can see my target object of Open Pipeline Snapshot. So we just created an Open Pipeline Snapshot source report. We just created an Open Pipeline Snapshot object. We're going to be marrying those two things. And I'm going to go ahead and click Save and Edit Field Mappings. All right, so this next screen is going to say, hey, you've got all these columns in your source report, and you've got all these fields in your custom object. Let's map them. So on my source report, I have an amount, and it's smart enough to give me similar data types. So the amount is of type currency. The only field in my source report is an amount field of type, which is type currency. So I'll select that. The close date maps to the close date. That date field we created, we're going to use something that isn't a column on the report, but it's a very important piece of information, the execution time. Forecast category, I think I have in my report. The Open Pipeline Snapshot name, I don't even know. Okay, when I made my custom object, what I should have done is had that be just an ID column. So that's my mistake. It should have been an auto-numbered ID column. Otherwise, you're forced to put something that doesn't make sense in here. So I think it's gonna, I'm probably what I'm gonna do in the real life is go back and change that to an auto-number ID. Because I don't want this. I should have mentioned that earlier. When you create the custom object, make it an auto number ID instead of having a text name. But so I'll fix it. Let me do the rest of the mapping. So I'm going to do my opportunity name mapping to the opportunity name, and then the stage will map to the stage. I'm going to save this. And it's interesting if it lets me save it, even though I'm not populating the name. Okay, so that is the mapped pipeline snapshot. Just to show you when you make dumb errors like the one that I made here, if I go back to my snapshot object, there's nothing in this object, so I still have time to change that. So the pipeline snapshot name, I could actually change the data type. Oh, you know what? I think I actually have to do it on the details. So what I should have done, and I'm sorry that I didn't think to do it, is just call this an ID and make it an auto number. So what I'm doing is I've gone back under setup to the object manager. I've gone and found the pipeline snapshot object. I've gone to the details. So this is how you fix your mistake, or my mistake, and scroll down, and the record name, I'm just going to call ID. We don't want this to be text. The default is text. It's my mistake. So the data type is, we want it to be auto number, and we can just literally put display format. We can do something, even just something really simple, like it'll just keep creating numbers as it goes. So the display format, just put it in brackets, squiggly brackets, put a 0 in there. You could also do something like put some huge number of zeros, and that'll give it a fixed width. Either way is fine. Starting number, I'm just going to put 1. And again, we had allowed reports. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my reporting snapshot and finish that up under setup, feature settings, analytics, reports and dashboards. We'll go to reporting snapshots. We can see the snapshot that I created because I saved it, but it's not scheduled yet. So I'm going to just go ahead and go back and look at this snapshot. I'm going to clean up the field mappings, and we shouldn't have to map that name anymore. So that's gone. That mistake, I caught my mistake. It's now not an issue. All the fields are mapped correctly. And the last thing to do with a snapshot is to schedule it. So let's go ahead and again, we're under setup, feature settings, analytics, reports and dashboards, reporting snapshots. And I've got my reporting snapshot here. If I go ahead and edit it, I can do it daily, weekly, or monthly. For pipeline, I tend to do it weekly. You might want to do this on Monday if that's when your leadership team meets. That's going to be the freshest, cleanest pipeline data. If you meet on Fridays, do that on Friday perhaps. Note here, kind of a rookie mistake is that the end date is 1 month from today. You're probably going to want to push that out into the future. I'm going to leave it there now. I want this to turn off a month from now. But the last thing is to say what time of day you want this to run. In the DevWorks, we only have one time available. In your production instance, you would have more hours of the day that you could choose to schedule this. So I tend to do it late in the day after people have made their updates. So this would run every Monday night or every Monday morning at 1 a.m. the way this is scheduled. You know, if this is really my only choice, I'd probably run it Tuesday morning at 1 a.m. instead. So when I go ahead and click save, this mechanism is now ready to go, and it's going to Tuesday morning at 1 a.m. It's going to go ahead and run itself. It's going to run the report as this running user, David. Again, you want that running user to be high enough in the organization that they have the visibility that it's needed. It's going to run this source report, and it's going to populate the target object based on the mapping we provided. All right. So we've now gone and defined the reporting snapshot. And then, you know, the next thing after that would be to build reports on the snapshot object. I had a chuckle. I was looking through some old stuff, and I found 2 screenshots for what things look like in Classic. And, you know, 4 weeks in, this is back in 2010, this is an old screenshot, but 4 weeks in, you know, the data started to populate, and our pipeline looks like it was 1,000,007. And we would group it by the date of the snapshot object, and that's the execution time, and then also group it by stage. So we create a report, we create the report using the opportunity snapshot object. So we're reporting off of the custom object that we created. So Janine asked the question, what is the benefit of creating a snapshot object versus just creating a dashboard for this data? So the only way to get a snapshot of every week, week after week, is to use this mechanism, the reporting snapshot, and then from there you can create the dashboard off of that. So that's what this screenshot is here. This is off of a dashboard, which is reporting off of the snapshot object data. So let's just show one quick step there. If we go back to creating a report, now that I've created that new custom object, I'm not reporting on opportunity data, I'm reporting off of snapshot data. So we're going to report off of, it's a custom report type that's automatically created. When we create that custom object, we check the box to allow reports, and we'll see the columns available that we created in our custom object. So Janine's question is a really important one. Why do we have to report off the snapshot? Well, it's kind of the whole point of all this. The snapshot is storing records from every single time that it runs. And then we can see the week over week trends. What was open at that 1 a.m. Tuesday morning of that particular week? What was open in our pipeline versus the week after versus the week after? Typically, when you just create a report and you put it on a dashboard, it's showing you the data now. This is allowing us to see what the data was like in history. All right, so just a quick recap. You're going to create a read-only snapshot report folder to put their source report in. You're going to create a source report in that folder, and it's going to have the columns that are going to support trending for you. You're going to create a custom object with matching fields per each column in that source report. You don't need 100 columns in your source report. You just need the ones that you're going to be doing trending analysis on. In your target object, your custom object, you're going to create one additional field. I typically call it date of type date. That's going to store the actual date that the snapshot ran. You're going to then go ahead and define and schedule the snapshot, and then you're going to wait for some time to go by. This is the hardest part of all this. You could also load in some historical data, but for somebody setting this up, I tend to set this up well in advance of when I'm going to want it. You might have to wait a few weeks to go by to see something. So if I go back to that last screenshot, this is 4 weeks after the snapshot was created, and it's captured each week's open pipeline. This is now 52 weeks or later after that, and I can look at more. This is basically the same report without the additional record count across the top, but it's the same type of data. Okay. So then the last step would be to build your reports and dashboards off of that snapshot object that you created. All right. So we can take some time for questions. Before we do that, I'll just mention I'm hosting a webinar on February 10th, talking about preparing for a board meeting. So we've got an amazing panel. These folks are pretty awesome, heads of revenue operations and operations at their companies. This is February 10th. We have information at opfocus.com about that. I'm teaching 2 classes coming up, February 14th to 18th, a 5-day admin class, and March 1st and 2nd, a 2-day hands-on reporting workshop. And again, information on the OpFocus website for that. We do have Dojo dates scheduled through March. I'm thinking to do one in April called Spring Cleaning, Decluttering Your Report and Dashboard Tabs. So I think that'll be the next one that gets on there. But in February, we're going to focus on sales reporting, and in March, we're going to focus on service reporting. So hopefully you can join us for that. And Jocelyn asked the question, could you explain how we match the date field to the report runtime? Absolutely, Jocelyn. So let me show you that in action in our system. So I just happen to have the reporting snapshot open. So when you create your reporting snapshot, what you're going to do when you edit the mapping and you're doing your mappings, to the left of that date field, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. To the left of your date field, you're going to choose execution time. And that's the moment that that snapshot runs. So this week, there's 68 open opportunities. It's the moment that those 68 get copied over into our reporting snapshot. Okay, so hopefully that helps you. So in the mapping, this is the one special one. That column is not part of a source report, but it is available when you're defining the reporting snapshot and you're mapping your fields. Awesome. Okay, so I do have a couple of other thoughts for you. Just keep in mind, reporting snapshots, they allow you to do up to 2,000 rows at a time, 2,000 records. So you might say to me, well, we're a big company, we're an enterprise company, we have 5,000 open opportunities. Well, in that case, you can also, that source report can be grouped, and you might group by stage, and you might sum the amount, and you might snapshot the summary information. So if you have more than 2,000 records that need to be snapshotted at OpFocus, we have 100 or less open opportunities. We're not close to that limit of 2,000. So a reporting snapshot will only ever copy up to 2,000 records at a time into your snapshot object. All right, so again, we have upcoming Dojo dates, and you can sign up on dashboarddojo.com, bring all your friends. I can't wait to hear how you guys make out with reporting snapshots. Maybe some of you could report back next week if you'd had any issues in our next session, February 9th. So thank you for joining us. Kyle, again, thank you for hosting. Hope to see all of you at the next Dashboard Dojo.
Thank you, everyone.